125 teams to go in my road to predict all 131 teams now this offseason. We're on to the LSU Tigers, who made a huge coaching change in the offseason and probably one of the bigger surprises in the offseason as well. Brian Kelly is now part of the LSU Tiger organization, of course, replacing Ed Orgeron. Since winning the national title with a historic offense long ago, this LSU team has had two very, very poor seasons. Can Brian Kelly help right the ship and get LSU back to being a national contender? Or will Brian Kelly not be a good fit in Baton Rouge and LSU continue falling down this mountain? What's up, Tailgaters? My name is Tailgate Nate. Welcome to my channel. And hey, I'm predicting all 131 teams this offseason, which means I'm doing your favorite team. So hit the subscribe button, ring the bell so you know when I upload your favorite team. And this especially goes out to LSU fans this video, but in any of my videos that you watch, you guys are going to know a lot more about your favorite teams than I will. So if you feel like you want to add something or feel like that I missed something, please leave it in the comment section down below. Be greatly appreciated. LSU football in 2022, they are the 8th ranked team in the SEC, according to me. Again, these are my personal power rankings. And for LSU in 2022, well, the expectation is that they get better, right? Coach O is gone. And, well, since winning that national championship in 2019, which now, of course, is the expectation at a program like LSU, is to be up there competing for a national championship, they've had two pretty tough seasons. And after the 2020 season, you feel like it would have gotten better, but it didn't. They had another 500 year last year, went 6-7, lost their bowl game to Kansas State. So it's been a rough couple of years for this LSU Tiger team, but who comes in at the helm is Brian Kelly. Of course, we'll look at the players in a little bit, but the thing that I think is most shocking to me about this LSU team is that how poor the offense has been relative to what they've done in prior years. I mean, it was third worst in the SEC in terms of getting yards per game, with only around 370 yards per game, 27 points per game. And I think a lot of LSU fans would agree that their defense wasn't really up to par either. 372 yards a game with 25 points allowed. They're doing a good job of keeping teams from scoring, but probably need to do a little bit of a better job stopping teams from getting that many yards. Again, the defense is not a bad stat line, but at a program like LSU, it probably should be better. Let's look at some of the players that Brian Kelly is losing, and also some players that are coming in, because LSU got quite a bit through the transfer portal. Talk about that in a little bit, but leaving this program as quarterback Max Johnson. He was the leading passer last year after Miles Brennan broke his arm. 2,800 yards, 27 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions on the year. And he has since transferred off this team, so Brian Kelly will be looking for a new starting quarterback. We'll talk about some candidates in a little bit. But two top running backs from last year, 1,000-yard rusher Tyrion Davis-Price is gone, as well as Corey Kiner, who was the second option out of that backfield. Lots of talent leaving the wide receiver room. Trey Palmer followed Mickey Joseph, the wide receiver coach, over to Nebraska. Deion Smith and Devontae Lee gone off the team as well. 3 offensive linemen. Couple guys off the defensive line that were pretty key as well. Andre Anthony, Neil Farrell are gone, including 136 total tackles last year in Damon Clark. That production is gone, as well as Derek Stingley, Eli Ricks, and Cordell Flott. 3 phenomenal defensive backs for this team. There's a lot of talent leaving LSU, so Brian Kelly had to fill some holes. He went to the transfer portal and did just that. Brought in quarterback Jaden Daniels, who probably should get the starting role, but again, Miles Brennan comes back as well. I would imagine Jaden Daniels gets the starting role. I think he gives this LSU team the best chance to win. Be a top 10 quarterback in the nation at his peak. Again, he has not played up to that expectation since his freshman year, but we will see what adventures await him under Brian Kelly. In the running back room, you got 2 pretty new faces. John Emery and Noah Kane are probably going to end up being number 1 and number 2 in that room. Wide receiver room, still full of talent. Keyshawn Boutte, Jeray Jenkins, and a transfer from Louisiana, Kyron Lacey, an all-Sun Belt wide receiver. That is going to be a huge pickup, especially losing a guy like Trey Palmer. On the defensive side, still lots of talent. 7 sacks in B.J. Ojulari. Other guys like Ali Gay, Jaquelin Roy and Mekhi Wingo, the transfer over from Missouri. Linebackers Mike Jones should be a huge part as well. Again, there's a lot of shoes to fill with 136 tackles coming from Damon Clark last year. And the defensive backs, they got a couple transfers in there as well. Sevyn Banks from Ohio State and Jarek Bernard Converse from Oklahoma State. And also they returned their third leading tackler from last year, also had 2 picks, and that is Jay Ward. So lots of talent still on this team. Brian Kelly's got a lot to work with. And the expectation is that LSU just gets better this year, right? I know a lot of the expectation is we want to be national contenders. We want to be up there. I think it's going to take some time for this LSU team to get back there, especially breaking in a new head coach in Brian Kelly. But Brian Kelly is not new to the big stage, right? He's been there before. He's taken Notre Dame to the college football playoff. But again, there's speculation on how good of a fit he's going to be at LSU. Let's take a look at the Tigers' schedule. It's a neutral site game on the Sunday in week 1 against Florida State. I think that's going to be a very interesting game. Other non-conference games, you got games at home against Southern, New Mexico, and UAB. As for the SEC slate, home games against Mississippi State, Tennessee, Ole Miss, and Alabama. Road games against Auburn, Florida, Arkansas, and Texas A&M. So a little preview of the schedule before we get into some percentages, which I'll explain a little bit later. My eye immediately jumps out to that Florida State game in week 1. Because if LSU loses that game to Florida State, it could be a sign that, well, there's a tough ride ahead for LSU fans. But if they beat Florida State, and I think especially if they beat Florida State comfortably, then that is going to be a huge kind of like, okay, LSU might be back this year. I think college football is better when LSU is better. That game is going to tell a lot about what is going to happen in LSU season. But the other non-conference games don't really interest me that much. They should beat Southern, should beat New Mexico. UAB, though, that's a tough game, so LSU shouldn't sleep there. What's nice about this schedule as well is when you look at that Ole Miss-Alabama game, those games, they have the bye week right in between there. So that's 2 very, very tough home games against 2 teams that figure to have a national ranking. Well, one of them definitely does. The other figures to have a national ranking coming into this year. That's going to be a hard, tough stretch here. In fact, there are pretty much there's a 6-game stretch right there in the middle of the schedule in SEC play. That's going to be a very tough stretch, in my opinion, for this LSU team. But I talked about percentages earlier. I don't do game-by-game predictions like I did last year. What I do instead is I go off a more percentage-based outlook to help me predict the record for the team. If the game is in red, you're probably not going to win the game. If the game's in orange, you're still probably not going to win. But hey, it's college football and upsets can happen. Yellow are your 50-50 or high upset potential games. Yellow-green are games you should probably win, but you got to watch out for the team on the other side of the ball. And green are games that you might as well book it as a win. 2 games in green, they're the games I already mentioned. Southern and New Mexico, they don't really interest me that much because LSU should be able to win those games. I talked about UAB already. That's a sneaky team. Don't sleep on UAB. They're a tough-nosed team, and they can make that game close if they really, really want to, and if LSU lets them. As for pretty much every other game is in yellow except one, which is the Texas A&M game in orange. Texas A&M figures to be a really good team this year, and I don't know that LSU is going to quite meet the level of Texas A&M this year, so I put that game in orange. But hey, if LSU proves to be really, really good this year, LSU proves to be back, then maybe they can go on the road and beat Texas A&M. But for right now, I got that game in orange, probably 70-30 game for me right now. In terms of the games in yellow, it's most of the schedule, which tells a lot about how this season could go for LSU. If Brian Kelly is a fantastic fit, LSU could be phenomenal. If Brian Kelly is not a good fit, well, LSU could miss a bowl game with this schedule, and that'll reflect in my record range here in a little bit. But again, that Florida State game, I've already talked about it. You got to win that game off the bat. Otherwise, it could be a long, long season for LSU Tiger fans. But this is a pretty favorable schedule in parts and unfavorable in some other parts. You get Ole Miss and Alabama at home. That's huge, especially playing in an environment like LSU. You also get Mississippi State at home. You would not want to go on the road and play that team. That's a very dangerous team on the road. And you also get Tennessee at home. They figure to be pretty good this year. Tennessee, a team that you want to play at home this year. But it's also unfair in that, well, they got a lot of tough road games against teams that they probably have a lot more talent than, that they're probably going to have a better record than by the end of the season. But it's a tough environment to play in. That's on the road against Auburn and on the road against Florida. And Arkansas, I think, is a better team than LSU. That's a 60-40 game for me right now in favor of Arkansas. But, guys, this is a very, very tough schedule to predict. And LSU is going to be a tough team to predict this year. I have LSU going 7-5. We'll get that out of the way right now. I have the Tigers going 7-5. I think it's going to take maybe a year for Brian Kelly to kind of get into the swing of the SEC, because not that Notre Dame, I know a lot of people got on Notre Dame's case for not really having a tough schedule. Some years they did, and it showed when Notre Dame made the playoff. The playoff committee thought that Notre Dame deserved to have a shot in there at the national championship, in which Brian Kelly comes here. This is probably the hardest schedule of Brian Kelly's career. I mean, let's face it. You're playing in the SEC. That's the best conference in college football. This is going to be very, very tough for Brian Kelly to traverse. But like I said, look at all the games in yellow. If Brian Kelly's not a good fit, they could miss a bowl game. I could see this team going 5-7. But if Brian Kelly's a phenomenal fit, all the transfers work out, the pieces are filled, I think the absolute ceiling for this team is 10-2. Look, it's the SEC. You're probably going to lose some games on the schedule, and I think you'll lose. The two most likely losses are obviously Texas A&M and Alabama. I predict there's going to be a couple more, though. I see LSU going 7-5 in 2022. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Also, please subscribe, ring the bell, because you guys want to know when your favorite team gets uploaded. Leave a like on the video, and most importantly, remember to play hard but tailgate harder. See all you guys in the next one. Goodbye.